In September 2014, I was on a beautiful beach in Greece with a film crew, waiting for the perfect sunset. The sky had been beautiful all day, and we all had this great image in our heads. A woman in her late 60s would walk into the water, carrying her surfboard, and the sky would turn pink. Well, against all odds, a storm arrived. And that kind of sky that really doesn't discuss with your schedule. So my producer came up to me. What do you think? Well, I thought we were screwed. I thought we were not going to get that beautiful morning shot. So for a couple of hours, the sky kept getting darker and more menacing until 20 minutes right before sunset, when a red light actually cut through the clouds. Well, it wasn't the image that I had in mind, but I looked around, I saw my crew, and I said, let's shoot. We entered into the water, we filmed everything, and then 3 days later, I looked at the images, and this was the result. It looked stunning, even better and more emotional than what I thought. And you know why? Because I did not control it. I did not anticipate that storm. There is something that I learned that day. We chase beauty and we chase perfection by trying to control every moment. But sometimes the moment becomes alive when you let go of that control. Time does not rehearse. I've been working as a filmmaker for about 20 years now. And the film is a very strange art form. We try to control everything. We make storyboards, rehearsals, multiple takes, and then the light changes, or an actor poses differently. And this is something that you can't control. Nowadays, I see something happening in the storytelling process itself. We're building systems, generative systems, were actually designed to remove the very condition that made possible that moment. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against technology. Filmmaking is very technological. We use cameras, we use editing, softwares, post-production. But way before technology, humans used to gather around fires to tell each other stories, to orient themselves into the unknown. And beyond that, they also placed marks on rocks and caves, a sign for an animal, a hunt. Not the thing itself, but a mark they agreed upon that could stand for something else. So humans understood that something could stand for something else. Well, something enormous happened there. Humans opened a new universe, the symbolic universe. They really started imagining together. They could represent what was not there in a different moment, in a different space. A sound became a word. A mark became a god. A flag became a nation. It's a piece of cloth, and yet people are willing to die for it. The German philosopher Ernst Cassirer defined us the symbolic species because we inhabit two worlds at once, the physical world, right here where we are, and the symbolic world. Art, laws, language, mathematics, science, cinema. These are all expressions of that symbolic world. And imagination is the faculty that we use to enter that world and to navigate it. So imagination is not just the capacity to express ourselves in an artistic way. It's also the capacity to hold alternatives to the present state of reality, to think about the future, to project ourselves beyond here and now. That's what imagination is. And it is really what makes us human. And that space between what is and what could be, well, for every filmmaker, that space is the production plan, the shot list, the shooting board. We prepare it, we design it. It's like a map for us. We orient ourselves on set, before. And trust me, if you want to organize 40 people on a beach, waiting for that perfect moment to catch that sunset, you need that map. But the map is not the territory. And that gap between the map and the territory, it's actually what preserved and nurtured human imagination over the course of centuries. Now, I have a question for you. What happens if the map becomes so adaptive and so predictive that people stop walking the territory altogether? The map becomes sufficient, not accurate, not true, sufficient. David Foster Wallace, in his novel Infinite Jest, imagined a movie so entertaining that people lost the desire to do anything else. They would just sit there and watch this movie for the rest of their lives. It became sufficient. Let me tell you about a conversation I had with a chatbot. I think it reveals much more about us than about the chatbot itself. A friend of mine sent me this video. It was really funny, and the answer was really funny too. So I replied the experiment. The car is 200 meters from my house. I want to get my car washed. Should I drive there or walk? And the AI said, walk. Well, how do you think the car gets to the car wash if I don't drive the car there? And the AI said, touche. The car definitely needs to be driven there. What I meant was drive there, then walk back. I said, I don't think you meant that. So I asked, do you actually understand cause and effect, or you're just predicting patterns? And yeah, at the lowest level, I'm a pattern prediction system. For a human, cause-effect direction is embodied, enforced by thermodynamics, metabolism, and survival. For me, it is modeled. And I say, it's a paradox. You don't feel the entropic cause-effect structure of the universe, so in theory, you should be absolutely free. And yet you're not able to emancipate yourself from the probability patterns. That is the condition from which human imagination emerges. And yeah, I say, I don't experience irreversible time, survival, existential stakes. Well, I thought it was a very interesting conversation because it really made me think that imagination is not born from unlimited capacity. Imagination is born from limits, from the fact that we're made of flesh and blood, and we live inside irreversible time. It's not something we possess. It's something we practice in time. And like any practice, it can atrophy. So the question is, our finitude, our limits, maybe it's not really a limit. It's not a flaw of our existence. Maybe it's really the condition that makes meaning possible. Most debates about artificial intelligence collapse two very different concepts into one: probabilities and possibilities. Now, probabilities are variations within an existing space, let's say a language or any symbolic space. But possibilities are transformations of the space itself. Now, generative systems are really good at exploring probabilities, and sometimes some kind of novelty can emerge there. But human imagination does something very different. We can open possibilities and redraw the map itself, change the borders of it. And then we need to carry the consequences of that. Cubism, the theory of relativity, cinema itself, the concept of democracy. These were not reconfigurations of older patterns. These were just few completely new openings of the field of possibilities. And they were lived in flesh and in time by humans. Every previous technology has always operated kind of downstream. You take the hammer. The hammer was, delegated the force of the fist. Computers, they delegated the calculation. But the symbol, the meaning, was always created by humans. Now, for the first time in history, a new technology is entering the process upstream, not downstream anymore. Let me show you a diagram here. So we have the chain of human symbolic life, symbolic representation, shared symbolic word, interpretation, imagination, possibility, freedom, and responsibility. Now, AI enters right there between the shared symbolic word and the imagination. And it populates the symbolic space in advance through prediction right before our imagination is formed. This is something that never happened before. And this matters because what's formative, it's not the outcome. What's formative, it's the process we go through and the uncertainty that we feel during that process. Without that uncertainty, imagination becomes less existentially grounded. In ancient times, people used to go to oracles to relieve the pain of facing this uncertainty by themselves. And the oracle was doing its job, you're going to be fine, everything is going to be great, and your destiny will be this and that. Now, I wonder if we're building a planetary scale, a vast machine to absorb our uncertainty. I think in this sense, freedom is what we want to choose. And let me give you an example by an experiment that I was reading about very recently. A group of researchers put 10 AI agents in a virtual town. After 3 days, they made laws, they broke them. A couple of them apparently engaged in some sexual encounters, and then they set the town on fire. Now, do you see what's missing there? Consequence. They could set a town on fire and start over again, like a video game. Game over, you put a new coin, you start over again. Well, I don't think that's freedom. I think freedom is choosing, knowing that other possibilities will disappear. And when you choose, you confront, you encounter reality. And that confrontation is execution. It's the friction that gives authorship, weight, and responsibility. It's where human agency emerges. And a great example of that friction was the Greek philosopher Socrates. Socrates would listen to you, appear to agree, and then he would ask you one very specific question that usually would collapse all your certainties. That discomfort that you felt in the conversation, that was not a flaw of the conversation. That was the conversation itself. Now, Socrates was sentenced to death by the Athenians because he was making people uncomfortable with his questions. And I wonder if an AI system that agrees and satisfies you all the time would have been sentenced to death back then. I think it would have been given a 5-star review. The risk here is not just the weakening of our cognitive skills. It's more the fact that the AI gives this permanent sensation of understanding without the real struggle that understanding requires. A sort of Dunning-Kruger effect, but on steroids. Now, The title of this TED is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which for an Italian filmmaker, it's quite intimidating, I have to say. But I think it's a very true title because every technology has the three of them, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The question is, what kind of human emerges from the relation to it? Stories tell us what to fear, what to desire, what to like, what matters. But stories are not just abstract concepts. Storytelling requires embodiment, a voice, a body. For a painter, a canvas. For a filmmaker, a set. For a musician, an instrument. And that friction in the encounter with the embodiment is what really gives meaning to art and to storytelling, because the friction is meaningful. The friction is what brings us closer to our creations. The embodiment brings that resistance. But in a system, in a generative system designed to predict, that friction is already mediated. There is no resistance there. You see the difference. So for artists, I think it's important to protect the moment before the answer arrives. Stay inside the question long enough, even if it hurts, because in that moment, something really new can emerge, something that was not probable. 20 years ago, Sir Ken Robinson said that TED celebrates the gift of human imagination, and I couldn't agree more. I think imagination is also an act of love. Is the courage to stay present before other human beings without reducing them to a statistical prediction. It's the base for trust and hope. And hope can exist only where the future can still be imagined. Now imagine a person in the continuous light of a Norwegian summer, walking through a beautiful field of flowers that keep blooming because they don't have any darkness in which to rest. That person is not looking for content. That person is looking for somebody whose answer still costs something, for somebody who is willing to bear the consequences of that answer, for somebody that, when the map proves to be insufficient, will be there to say, let's shoot. Time does not rehearse, and what makes us human is that neither do we. Thank you very much.